Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shub, and together with my partner and co host Patrick, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all. Patrick, we are back again after a short break, and
Yeah.
better yet, it's episode number 67. So it's a prime number, so obviously, even more reason for us to feel good about it. I bet you didn't see that coming, did you?
I did indeed not. How do you know
Yeah.
that it's a prime number? Have you learned them up until a certain one, or?
No, because I mathematically tested each.
Yeah.
The truthful answer is I already knew,
Yeah.
but just to I guess rub it in the face, I tested each one by one,
Yes.
presumably, and then found out that everything is 67 is good to go as a prime number.
Well done. Well done. It also shows how efficiently we spend time here at Fundamental
Yes,
on
we
testing
have
prime
nothing.
numbers.
We have nothing better to do than test prime numbers.
Sweet. Sweet. No, I've been good. I mean, I had this stomach bug that has been pestering half the world, it seems. How have you been?
I can't complain, all things considered.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a new side of you.
Yes. And speaking of, I guess, prime numbers, and maybe not complaining, but we'll roll with it. So a few months ago, we did an episode on the founder traits we love, right? And we discussed several aspects there. So for those of you interested, please check it out. And I think we go into a lot of details on what we really like in founders where we build an enduring partnership with. And I think there's some aspects there which uh, some of it maybe has been heard before. Some of it also seems not so obvious, especially when you hear it about what it actually takes to create a partnership in the longer term. And I think what we wanted to dig into in this discussion is a specific aspect of that goes a long way towards building trust or eroding trust, and how we observe some of these things in the crucial diligence phase, right, for us as investors. And look, it's long been held that hey, VC is not precise, it's an art, etc. How do you judge people? It's a very subjective basis. So at best you're taking a few bets, you're relying on heuristics, etc. And that is not to be denied, but I would argue, I think, with the body of knowledge we have and the many case studies we've seen, there are a few interesting ways in which you uncover incidents where it can weigh on your ability to trust the other person and what it actually reflects on when we see certain things during the diligence phase, right? And so maybe you want to kick us off on what
Oh, God.
this means and what this implies.
I just think it's a common misconception that not only founders have, I think it's across society. You can cut across society and you will find this misconception. That is, hey, if I show something that I did wrong, or if I show a weakness, if I show a poor decision in the past, if I show a fail, the judgment will be, oh, you will be unfit going forward, or this is not for me. I don't want to invest with you, or whatever. And that is a misconception. That can be true with, let's say, certain people judging you for it because, whatever, they have a simplistic framework, or I don't know, they have a taste for the person that only ever was successful. But that would be a quite immature framework, and that's not the person you actually would want on board, which is why this is a misconception. It's also a misconception because that person obviously does not exist. Like who's perfect? No one, right?
Yeah.
I have a saying that when I do founder references, Shub, and I told you this in my pre-briefing here. When I do founder references, fairly often, not always, but fairly often, I tell the person that is giving me the reference, hey, I don't trust people whose motivations I don't understand, and I don't trust people whose limitations I don't understand. I also don't trust people who don't understand their own limitations, but that's not
Yes.
for the founder reference call, because I'm getting the reference from someone else. And after that, I follow up with a little bit of explanation what I mean by that. And essentially, I tell them, look, if you only give me the good things on this call, I will pass on this person.
Yeah.
And that comes from a place of, I already know that you're not perfect. Neither am I.
Yeah.
But if I don't know what your limitations are, after an extensive process with you, talking to your references, then all that tells me or suggests to me that there is something really big here that I better understand, that everyone is trying to keep under wraps.
Yes.
So give me the good, give me the bad, give me a rounded picture. And I think that's a common misconception is, hey, I have to hide the things that I didn't do right, or I have to shiny and brighten them up in order to make them look like a strength. You know, this old joke, hey, what is your biggest weakness? Hey, I'm too impatient. Shub, you
Yes.
know, I'm
Yes.
always punctual.
Yes.
Yeah.
I work too hard and don't get.
Okay, I know you now for that many years that I know you would never tell me that, but yeah. But
There you
isn't
go.
that
That secret's been revealed now on episode number 67.
oh, I need too little sleep. Yeah, okay, sure. But aren't you like that too? I mean, when someone doesn't give you that, like you wouldn't be trusting them.
Yeah. I mean, so I think we've said this before, right? I think, um, so for example, just to paint the picture, I think you and I both believe that if, for example, you flood a company with too much money, it generally speaking leads to value destruction. And you actually need to sort of constrain a company to extract the best out of it. Similarly, I think if so, as a person, as an individual, and this is true for every person in an individual capacity, but more so if a person is taking on a leadership role as a founder, the only way you can actually improve and get better is to actually focus on constraint. I mean, I wish I knew all the steps now. There's, a concept called theory of constraint. So for those of you, check it out. It defines like a step-by-step process on how you nail down what is holding you back and how you track and improve it and so on. And if you're a believer in that philosophy, if you're unwilling to acknowledge or share or even identify what your constraint is, by definition, you'll not improve. And the same holds true if you extend it from a leader of an organization to the organization. If you're not willing to acknowledge the weakness of the organization, that organization is probably not going to improve, which is why, even in a previous episode, I forget which one, but we've discussed some characteristics of compounders and businesses that compound very well. And one common trait you and I have observed is usually what happens is they keep going in a, let's say, non-linear fashion, parabolic, whatever, and eventually they find some bottleneck. And the best founders, and I think we have discussed this in that episode on founder traits we love, they're obsessed about what is the bottleneck in the firm. And they ruthlessly try to work on delimiting the bottleneck in the company. But you can only acknowledge a bottleneck as a firm if you if
Oh,
you
now I see.
if you shine the spotlight on it. So if nobody shines the spotlight on it, or misrepresents it, or shoves it under the rug, nobody knows what is the bottleneck. So then you come up with artificial reasons like, hey, we need more money, and the market's bad, or sentiments changed, and vague reasons like that, without acknowledging the own way you're debottlenecking, or you could be debottlenecking yourself. So in fact, I would go so far as to say, if you don't know what is constraining you as an individual or as an organization, you're not going to be a compounder, because you have no idea what your bottleneck is and how to remove it.
Oh, that is so well put. That is so true. Yeah, but now there is a canyon between not knowing and glossing over / ignoring, painting over, putting it under the rug. I
Yes.
mean, it's the putting it under the rug part that is active sabotage of
Yes.
yourself, and
Yes.
in that process
Mm-hmm.
in that process of building a company, and then in that process of courting an investor and building that kind of a relationship. I mean, we've discussed this earlier, Shub. So it happens fairly often that you have founders unaware of bottlenecks,
Mm-hmm.
not just fair, and not just outside of the portfolio. It happens inside of our portfolio all the
Yeah.
time. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's constant work that founders want to put in, right? Because there's the next bottleneck lurking.
Correct.
But then to know a weakness, a bottleneck, constraint, a failure, and then actively put that under the rug, well, that's actually active sabotage. That luckily
Yeah.
happens less often, but
Mm-hmm.
it does happen. And we discussed two instances. I mean, one of
Sorry,
them.
actually, before you go there, I want to provide a little bit of additional context and a setup for our viewers and listeners to even understand why this is so important to you and me, right? Um, I think, and I think some of this thing that I'm going to share, it's I guess based on our ability to judge and extrapolate. Some of it is common knowledge. Some of it is facts, or at facts to the best of what is published in open domain. uh, when you see a lot of high profile startup collapses, companies that have raised a lot of money and then go under, etc., usually what happens is there is a small issue that folks at some point of time knew, but maybe brushed aside and like ignored as more and more money kept coming in or as time passed, until it becomes an existential issue. And then because when it has become an existential issue, since it has never been solved, I think nobody actually in the organization or the investor base knows how to deal with it, and which is why it becomes a crisis situation for the company. I think both you and I know of investors who, especially in the earlier stages, but I think there are examples of that happening in later stages as well, would be okay to uh, when they look at a story and see a very a fantastic, exciting story with some sort of an ugly blot on the side, they might be okay to ignore it. I think you and I, we are uniquely similar in this regard, even though we are
Yeah.
very different individuals otherwise. I think so sometimes we miss things, but once we see something there, I think we need an explanation, and we
I'm like a
need,
bulldog then. I'm
yeah,
like a bulldog then.
we need an explanation that sits well with us and where we can come to the ground truth with the founder in a absolutely go down to the basement and see the founder eye to eye. And I think if that doesn't happen, then I think you and I are no longer in a position to be able to see the rest of the story. We only focus on that. So that's where this obsession of yours and mine comes from.
You're absolutely right. And inconsistency never becomes consistent on its own. It just doesn't. You can only find the looking for the right metaphor. Sometimes something looks inconsistent because you don't understand the surrounding of it, the context of that
Mm-hmm.
inconsistency, or it doesn't match quite your life experience, and then you have to learn something new, so that actually, hey, I've been matching it to the wrong experience set, and now that I match it to what you have taught me, yes, it seems consistent. That's why we do references so much, right? Is
Yeah.
to get that external consistency validated. But sometimes that inconsistency is also inconsistent just because, hey, that's a big blemish on that painting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
is that painting ever going to be good by you ignoring that inconsistency, that big red, you know, edding marker dot that they put on that painting?
Yes.
No, it's never. It's just your comfort zone of choosing to ignore it, but that's not going to help the painting or the company.
For Seinfeld fans, it's like that cashmere set sweater with the red dot.
Oh, Georgie, Kashmir. Yes. That is a great reference. I love that. Did you get that? Did you get it at a discount, George? Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So So you and I are like that. I think once we see the dot, we can't see the rest of the sweater.
Yeah, then I want to understand. Hey, okay. So now we come to the point for the founder. So here, how you as a founder can react to this, and you're hurting yourself first and foremost before you hurt us. You can come up with a little white lie in order to make sure that people don't look there. Hey, this is something I did in my past that I'm not proud of. I don't want you to look at. And by the way, I'm not talking about criminal record. I'm talking about, hey, maybe when you call that person I fired, they will tell you something bad. So better don't look there. This is why I fired them. Completely egregious, absolute liar, notorious liar, will lie about everything, blah, 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 blah. So now you're coming up with this little white lie or exaggeration, embellishment of a situation in order to gloss over it and hope that the other side is basically also glossing it over. First and foremost, you're treating yourself to that lie because you now have not been in a position to internalize and just speak about that experience from a position of strength. Because that's the other side, how you can now choose it. You can now say, hey, look, there was this episode, this experience. This is what I did. I know now, today I will do this differently. And that's why I'm stronger today. That's why I'm much better. You know what that is, Shub? That's a professional athlete's mindset.
Yeah.
That's what exactly a professional athlete that belongs into the absolute elite league of their sport will always strive to do. They will look the film, the video of the body movement on that specific whatever shot or jump that they did. And they will say, okay, you know what? That is painful to watch. Next time I need to do better. And they will spend hours like that. I mean, hours.
Yeah.
They will spend years doing just that film study and having a coach tell them, hey, you screwed up there. Do it like this. So if you're not doing it like that, if you're choosing the gloss over motion in order to hope that the person doesn't look there, ask yourself, are you really in a professional athlete mindset, or is this just some amateur weekend kind of, sport you're playing?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you see the latter. Yeah, the latter is the norm, not the professional athlete mindset.
I agree. I think not knowing is not terrible, especially when you acknowledge that you don't know. I think either coming up with elaborate explanations, in lieu of what should be the rightful response, that is not good. Although I would say it's still not the worst. The worst is, of course, covering it with white lies. And unfortunately, as you and I know quite painfully, Patrick, is it starts with white lies, and the problem is it doesn't end there. It kind of then, because you and I again don't, unfortunately for the other guy, we don't stop there. So then the cross questioning on the white lie, then you have to cover it with a bigger lie until you can have. And you and I have both had it, where cases where then all it takes for us is one phone call, and then the whole thing just completely breaks apart.
Do you remember that one phone call where someone told you, hey, this investor isn't investing because of that reason, and then he didn't know that you're close friends, and that person told you, I've never spoke to the founders?
Correct. That's
never
right.
spoke to the founders. That's what they told you.
Yes. And at that point, once I know that, it is impossible for me to think of anything else, right? How can I pay attention to the founders' backgrounds or their execution, the numbers, story? I can't, because at that point, I'm thinking, hey, I know for a fact that this is a blatant lie, which was unprovoked, unnecessary. So now I'm just wondering, hey, will I ever be able to trust anything this person tells me in the future?
Yeah. There's that. And then, what you said earlier, are they really in a mindset where they actually want to constantly improve themselves to compound? You cannot trust both things. So motivations, limitations. So there's big fat lies. And so I bet founders listening to us are say, come on, guys. I'm not doing big fat lies. I'm not that stupid. And no, many people will not be like that. So this is the extreme case. However, there's another case where that happens, and where I will be like a bulldog with its bone, and you will be that. It's the embellishment. It's the added vagueness. So we spoke in the founder traits episode. I believe we spoke about our loving moniker of the onion founder,
Yes.
right? Again, this does not describe the smell that we're looking for. It describes
Or the fact that it brings tears to our eyes.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't mind that.
In that sense, maybe the founders we are discussing on this episode are closer to the
Yeah.
onion founders.
Yes. But it describes the experience that you have when you peel layers with each other. You meet each other more often, and every time you peel the layers with each other, and they do that with us too, the great ones, right?
Yeah.
And they want deeper insight and deeper discussion, and it becomes deeper. But deeper means more granular. Every time you're not going back to an abstract level. We had a funny, it was okay, quick tangent, but it relates to this, I promise. So you and I, we had a call with a team colleague today. And so he had a second meeting with a founder where after we had an internal discussion, they went back to that founder and they asked a very, very granular set of questions that we were able to come up with because, we have vertical focus, we repeat a lot, blah, blah, blah. So we can come to more specific questions more quickly sometimes. And this founder did not answer the first of the very few specific set of questions, went into 25 minutes of a monologue, and then ended the call basically saying, hey, I know this hasn't been specific, but I hope you understand the vision now. Well, he didn't ask for the vision. He asked for a second meeting with a more granular set of answers. That's the opposite effect or the opposite experience of being an onion founder. So the non-onion type founder goes back to the outer layer or even further and becomes again vague and abstract. So that's the other side, how you can sometimes see the founders trying to gloss over or put something under the rug is not necessarily a big fat lie, but it is making things blurry and vague and describing them in increasingly vague terms and statements.
Yes.
Actually, I'm curious, Shub, do you get that at all in Asia?
Not as much, I have to say. Because I think the cultural context is such that it by the way, there's good and a bad to this, so I'm not saying it's unilaterally a good thing. The culture is such that it tends to force a sense of personal responsibility. So even if the founders try to veer away from it, it is normal to try to seek a sense of personal responsibility in the answers or in the
Fascinating.
thinking.
Okay, follow-up question. Do you notice it in Asian founders who have been educated in the West more?
No, that it changes things a bit. It changes
It does,
things.
right?
Yeah, it does. For sure. For sure. So Asian founders educated in the West, it changes. Asian founders who have got early rounds from a certain Western um, incubator slash accelerator slash investor group, which has investments all over the world, right? That also dramatically changes how things are presented.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Fascinating. I don't understand why. No, of course I do understand, but I don't understand why more people don't understand that this is a misconception. Just if you're going into a marriage with the partner of your choice, are you hiding yourself from her or him? I mean, I'm not talking body functions, okay? I'm talking character. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also not talking about whatever. Hey, I'm not going to tell you about all of my ex-boyfriends, girlfriends, flings, hookups, etc. Some people might do that, but I don't know a lot of people that feel that is needed to be in a 50, 60, 70-year committed partnership. But are you actively trying to hide your character flaws, your personal limitations, your grandest fails in life? Who would do that? Who wants to go into such a long marriage?
So it's interesting that you put it, and I wasn't expecting us to go in this direction, but it's fascinating. So let's stay with this. It's also a very interesting psychological aspect. So ask yourself this, right? and you can also do a game theory style analysis of this, but maybe let's not go there. Uh, all other things held equal, which founder or person would be more comfortable acknowledging their defects or their constraints? Someone who's of exceptional quality, or someone who's not so good?
Now that you phrase it that way, I bet 100% of the listeners will say number one.
Correct, because they know that in spite of bringing out the defects, the overall package is a great deal.
So it's interesting what bucket you put yourself in by not doing that.
Correct. So if you are self-selecting, if you're self-selecting to not report your defects, all I have to do is do a game theory analysis and put myself in your shoes to know who you are. Because by self-selecting that, you've already told me what you think of yourself. Sorry if I went too fast and too abruptly for those of you who don't follow game theory, but I think that's too involved. But for those of you who follow, hopefully you get it. All you have to do is do an analysis of the decisions taken by the founder in a binary form and how I receive it, and then flip the thing and which decision is optimal. So, yeah.
Do you remember our episode on investor trades and how to choose your right investor? It applies the exact same way.
100%.
If founders cannot ask their investor, if founders ask their investor, hey, tell me what you will not be able to help me with. Tell me what is your biggest limitation. And that investor will come up with an abstract or vague term. Run.
Yeah.
Because they will not be an exceptional investor according to your framework. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah.
But seriously, my question about that marriage, do you know people who would go into a long-term committed marriage like that?
I think that number or the proportion is much larger than you think, unfortunately.
God. Do you think these are happy marriages, lasting marriages?
They might be lasting. They might be. I don't know. Are they happy or not? I mean, look, who am I to say? That's not the nature of my marriage, thankfully. So
yeah, likewise. Thankfully, 20 years.
But it's again, I think, I think the reason why you can still imagine those kinds of partnerships, or I would say those partnerships are an inevitability. By the way, there's not a commentary on anyone specific, but all you have to do is, again, you repeat the game theory analysis. You can find a matching. All you have to do is a matching between, folks who have self-selected on one side and folks who have self-selected on a similar side. They match and they stay in that partnership.
I had a diligence process like that, which felt extremely exceptional to both sides, I believe. A few months ago, recent investment of ours. Where the founders allowed me to see their weaknesses through references, but also self-reflection. And keep in mind, this is not like, oh my God, we had known each other for 10 years. Yeah. Then things are much, much easier. And I had done the same. And there were even, I don't want to say tears, but it was like one of the most emotional calls ahead of, we weren't even invested in each other yet, right? So they hadn't chosen us. We hadn't made up our mind yet. It is such a bonding experience too, if you can really make yourself vulnerable to each other and you feel comfortable doing that. And look, if you make yourself vulnerable and the other person doesn't choose you, what have you lost? You have lost nothing. You have actually just made selection.
Yes.
You call it self-selection. You can also call it adverse selection. So you have actually just allowed the other party to walk away and make sure you just found out they are not for you.
Correct.
It's one of the most effective and efficient filters that you can have in this kind of process. But when you also expose yourself that way, you can find someone else who reciprocates. And then all of a sudden you understand each other deeply and it's a bonding kind of a moment. I like to think these founders trust me.
Yeah.
Not because I'm perfect, but because they know who I am.
Yeah, I'm quite sure that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things they asked me, hey, what is the least proud moment you had? And I shared that with them. And then I connected them with that founder. And that I told the founder, hey, don't just tell them what you like about me. Tell them this one instance that I'm not proud of. And you know what? I think they love me for it. So
Yeah, that reminds me, a very recent investment we did. The founder even asked me, "Hey, you say so and so on your thesis that you like to back certain companies, but I saw that you backed, this other company which doesn't fit that description at
great
all.
question.
Why did you do that?" Right? Obviously,
I
I gave
respect that.
a truthful answer for what happened and what led to that decision, and also, hey, you say so and so, but which of your companies are actually fitting that description. I respect that, again,
Me too.
to be able to have that conversation, and I think it's also led to a very deep bond with those founders as well.
You could have chosen to just come up with some abstract and vague marketing stuff, right? So you could have said, yeah, but
like
this is how
like
it fits.
we're always looking to add value to
Yeah.
the companies we invest in. Remember that one?
God. Yeah, or you could also say, yeah, back then everybody was doing this, or yeah, this was a big thing, or hey, this is what my partner did, but not me. You can externalize blame all kinds of ways, or you can internalize it and say, hey, look, this is what happened today. I'm seeing the world differently.
Yes.
Okay, now you're a human. Thanks. You have contours now that I understand. Great.
Yeah. Before we move on, I bet you some of our viewers and listeners are saying, hey, I'm not a liar. I'm not going to shove things under the rug or, misrepresent things or gloss over things. But I think there's actually an even larger subset of founders who perhaps are in a zone where they don't even know what their deficiencies or missteps are or have been, right? So, and I think, we've also come across this case where when you ask them more pointed questions, they'll say stuff like, hey, it was the market, or it was this the time, it was this situation, that situation, etc. Not because they're lying, because they don't know. Again, I'm not saying that is as bad as the other category where there's some active hiding or information obscuring going on. But at best case, it shows a lack of willingness or a lack of preparation in choosing to actively identify what might be your constraints. And I think that is not necessarily a great trait as a founder. So the best thing you should do if you're in that position yourself, one of our viewers or listeners, is maybe do a critical analysis. What I can recommend is checking out. I think it's the theory of constraints. So I mean, maybe we'll get corrected if that's not what it's called. It's a good framework for how you can analyze what is holding you back or what you did wrong. And I would suggest, working on it to identify what is holding you back. If you haven't done it yet, and if you think you haven't done anything wrong, that's the wrong state of mind. And definitely, if you haven't already been proven wrong, you'll be proven wrong very soon. So, I mean, I would say it's very, very important before pitching to VCs, you undertake that exercise. Or actually, forget about pitching to
It's for
VCs.
the company building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You owe it to your company.
100%. That's the athlete's mindset. I agree. One very quick remark before we wrap up, or as we wrap up. And look, some decisions, as you build companies, as you build your career, as you build teams, whatever, sometimes it's also, hey, you made a conscious decision to assume something, or to bake in an assumption, and that assumption was just wrong. Okay, then what's so harmful about saying that? I mean, okay, if you tell me 20 decisions in a row and every time you had assumptions in there that were wrong, maybe that says something about your decision making, your analysis, your research skills, your information acquisition, your information processing. All of them could be constraints for you. But if it's one big bet that you took, that bet had an assumption baked in, and that assumption didn't pan out, I mean, don't you want to discuss that? How can you learn from that to make sure that assumption next time is going to be right? I mean, that's just pure logic. If you want to be excellent in something, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are not valuable or you're not an amazing person. Nobody is perfect.
Correct.
Yeah. Hey, this was cool. This was entirely unprepared.
Yeah.
So
I was quite surprised how many different directions and references and Easter eggs we threw in there.
yeah. Nice. Easter eggs, quite timely. Okay.
Quite timely. Yes.
To this day, I don't understand what the egg is in the Easter. So
You mean you don't mean the festivities part. You mean in the tradition.
correct. Yeah, and I don't mean the video
Okay.
gaming. I mean that's just a derivative of that.
Yeah.
I know what an Easter egg is, but why the egg in the Easter?
I feel like I had read this backstory a few years ago. I wish I could have impressed you right now, but okay, you've okay.
In many
you
ways, you do impress me. So
okay. I'm glad that's the case.
yeah,
Let's just say for everyone's sake that you also impressed me.
thank you. I got it on the record now, Mom. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That was nice.
Cheers.